So, imagine for a second that the romance you thought you were in. You know, the butterflies, the late night texts, that intense focus on each other. What if it wasn't a romance at all?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what if what you were experiencing was actually just a highly structured operating system, and its only real function was to hack your deepest vulnerabilities?
It is a genuinely chilling premise to start with.
Yeah.
But it perfectly captures the essence of the source material we are looking at today.
Yeah.
We're doing a deep dive into a fascinating, highly analytical essay titled Outside the Romantic Script, an analysis of desire, power, and subjectivity. And it basically forces us to look at human intimacy through a completely different, highly systemic lens.
It really does. But before we really get into the mechanics of this, I want to be upfront with you, the listener.
Good idea.
Because this essay is deeply rooted in feminist theory, and it relies heavily on critiques of what the author terms a patriarchal operating system. So, our mission today is not to debate the politics of these theories or to endorse them or, take any kind of side. We're simply here to impartially unpack the author's arguments and report on the concepts so you can understand the underlying logic of this specific case study.
That context is totally vital because the author is using a very specific real world case study as a kind of sociological autopsy.
Right.
We are examining the dynamic between two individuals the text refers to as 045 and Zhang San, alongside a third figure who acts as an observer.
Okay.
And we're going to look at how power, desire, and digital control intersect and unpack the author's argument that true personal agency requires recognizing the invisible scripts we are all handed.
So I guess we have to start the foundation of the author's argument, which is this concept of the romantic script.
Exactly.
If I'm following the text correctly, the idea is that society gives us like a default set of instructions for how romance is supposed to work.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
But what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, according to the essay's framework, this default script dictates very specific roles based on gender. So men are positioned as the active subjects.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
The text argues that a man's pleasure and satisfaction in this script are structurally tied to the desire for power, entry, and control. Like, they are expected to be the pursuers, the ones who act upon the world.
Right, the ones driving the action.
Yes, and women, conversely, are scripted as passive objects. The author contends that women are socially conditioned to find their value, their self-worth, and their validation through being chosen by a man.
Which creates a dependency.
Exactly. It establishes a kind of structural emotional dependency from the start.
I mean, think about the media you probably consumed growing up. How many times have you seen that exact dynamic play out on screen?
Oh, everywhere. All the time.
Right. The guy who won't take no for an answer, the grand romantic gesture that's actually just, boundary pushing, and the woman whose entire character arc is validated the moment she gets picked.
Yeah, the classic rom-com trope.
Exactly. The text is arguing that this setup is inherently unequal by design. And that brings us directly into the dynamic between Zhang San and 045, because the text describes Zhang San as a master executor of this specific script.
He essentially weaponizes it, honestly. The author focuses heavily on how Zhang San initiates what is described as high-frequency, long-duration intimacy with 045.
High-frequency intimacy, that sounds intense.
It is. But the analysis here reframes this behavior completely. The essay argues we shouldn't look at this as spontaneous affection or like a whirlwind romance.
Right.
We need to look at it as a process of establishing a very specific bodily response pattern in 045.
Which just blew my mind. The author is describing this almost like Pavlovian conditions.
Yeah.
But how does that actually work mechanically? I mean, how do you wire someone's nervous system through romance?
So the text details how he monopolizes her physical space and sensory input. It's the constant presence, the unending barrage of physical touch.
Wow.
The demanding of her time to the point where she has very little space to process her own independent thoughts.
It's overwhelming.
Very. By flooding her system with this intense, uninterrupted physical and emotional stimuli, he creates a literal physical memory in 045's body. He basically trains a response mechanism.
Okay, let me just pause here because I was literally screaming this at the page while I was reading.
I know exactly what you're going to ask.
Is Zhang San supposed to be this conscious, evil mastermind? Like, is he sitting in a dark room mapping out his psychological manipulation of her nervous system? Or is he just a guy playing a role that society handed him a little too intensely?
It's a great question. The author approaches this from a structural level, which makes the intent somewhat secondary.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the analysis suggests it doesn't actually require Zhang San to be an evil mastermind plotting out behavioral conditioning. He might simply be following the default script of masculine pursuit to its absolute logical extreme.
Just doing what he thinks he's supposed to do.
Exactly. He is doing what the script tells him constitutes passion. But regardless of his internal intent, the sociological outcome is identical. He creates a physical dependency. He trains her body to expect him, meaning only his presence can trigger that feeling of comfort or validation.
He makes himself the only key to a lock he just installed.
That is a perfect way to put it. And that physical dependency becomes the first anchor in his chain of control over her. But to understand how this anchor caught so firmly and why it worked on her specifically, the author insists we have to examine 045's context.
Because, this kind of hack wouldn't work on a system that didn't have any open vulnerabilities to begin with.
Exactly.
The text paints a very clear picture of 045's situation. She is a 28-year-old woman dealing with a profoundly fragile sense of self-worth.
Yeah, she's going through a lot.
The essay notes she recently went through the end of a long-term relationship, and she has experienced significant physical trauma, specifically an abortion. She is incredibly raw.
She is in a state of deep physical, psychological, and emotional depletion.
Yeah.
And contrast that with Zhang San. The text notes he is a 20-year-old male younger, highly proactive, intensely energetic.
A total mismatch in energy levels.
Completely. And if we place them back into the framework of the romantic script we just discussed, 045 is harboring deep doubts about her own charm, her sexual value, and whether she is even worthy of being loved after what she's been through.
If you've ever felt completely depleted, you know that when you're in that much doubt, any positive data feels like a lifeline.
It really does.
The text explains how this leads to a massive, tragic misinterpretation. Zhang San exhibits this extreme, almost suffocating possessiveness over her. And 045, because of her vulnerabilities, she misreads that controlling behavior as validation. She tells herself, he really wants me. She uses the intense attention of this young, handsome man to paper over the immense power imbalance in their dynamic.
And this brings us to a critical juncture in the essay's argument. The author introduces a concept called the exchange of submission.
Ugh, that phrase alone is just so heavy.
It is. It functions as a dark economic metaphor within the text. Because 045's internal reservoir of self-worth is so depleted, she trades her bodily compliance to buy the feeling of being needed and chosen.
Right.
She submits to his control because, within the patriarchal script she has internalized, his desire for her is the only currency that validates her existence.
Okay, let me see if I'm visualizing this right. It feels a bit like taking out a really terrible high-interest loan.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Like, you go to a bank, you know the terms are predatory, you know they basically own you if you sign, but your credit score is in the gutter, and they're the only institution willing to approve you.
Yeah, exactly.
You desperately need the cash, or in this case, the validation, just to feel like you can survive the week, so you make the trade.
And taking that financial metaphor further, what makes this dynamic so brutally efficient for Zhang San is that he doesn't have to put up any real collateral of his own. He doesn't have to prove his character, his empathy, or his long-term reliability. He simply has to perform the actions of intense desire.
Just the performance is enough.
Exactly. The text argues that 045's own psychology does the heavy lifting. Her desperation to be valued fills in all of his deficits. She convinces herself he is a good partner because she literally needs his intense desire for her to be meaningful.
It is genuinely terrifying to realize that the most basic human desire, just wanting to feel valued, can be weaponized into total submission like that.
It is.
But if we look at the mechanics of this, his whole strategy relies on physical presence, right? That high-frequency intimacy is the primary tool he's using to keep this loan active.
Yes, initially.
So what happens when he can't physically be there? Life happens, people travel, the essay mentions a summer break, and that must have completely broken his control matrix.
The author details this exact scenario. There is a period during a summer break where their physical distance increases significantly. Zhang San can no longer rely on physical touch to maintain the bodily memory he installed. So he pivots. The essay describes how he shifts the dynamic to virtual control through what the text calls video naked chats.
Now, on the surface, if someone looked at that, they might just think, okay, modern couple doing long distance, trying to keep the spark alive.
Sure, that's the conventional view.
But the text frames it completely differently, doesn't it?
It does. The essay analyzes this not as romantic maintenance, but as low-cost system maintenance.
Wow. Low-cost system maintenance.
Yeah, by initiating these highly explicit visual exchanges, he is cyclically activating 045's bodily memory. The visual stimuli trick her nervous system into feeling his presence.
So it's still conditioning?
Exactly. He is maintaining the illusion that he still intensely desires her, which keeps her hooked on that validation, even from hundreds of miles away. It ensures the anchor remains firmly set.
But the narrative escalates here, and this is where the author introduces a truly dark turn. Zhang Sun isn't just participating in these video chats.
No, he's not.
He is secretly recording them. He is backing up these private, highly vulnerable visual materials without her knowledge, and definitely without her consent.
And we have to ask why he would go to that extreme.
Right, why cross that line?
The text reveals that this wasn't a random escalation. Zhang San is actually adapting his strategy based on a previous failure.
A failure.
Yeah, the essay introduces his prior interaction with the observer, the eye of the text, who we will discuss in depth shortly.
Ah, okay.
But essentially, his previous attempt to control the observer failed completely because the observer gave him absolutely zero leverage. He had nothing to hold over her.
Oh, wow. So he's systematically fixing a bug in his own operating system.
Exactly.
He realized that physical conditioning wasn't enough because distance breaks it.
Yeah.
He needed collateral. He needed an absolute guarantee that she couldn't leave.
The author describes these secret recordings as a nuclear button, and the essay outlines exactly how this digital material functions as a strict control protocol.
A control protocol.
Yes. It serves three distinct, devastating functions. First, prevent exit.
Okay.
045 cannot leave the relationship without facing the catastrophic risk of these recordings being exposed. Her freedom is held hostage.
And it's a nuclear button because it's unilateral destruction. If she leaves, her life is ruined by the exposure, but he faces relatively little consequence in the social structure the author describes.
Exactly.
What's the second function?
Suppress demands. If 045 starts to feel the inequality of the relationship, if she tries to ask for equal treatment or demands basic respect, Zhang San doesn't have to engage in an argument.
He doesn't even have to fight.
No. He only has to subtly hint at the existence of the recordings. The psychological weight of that threat alone forces her to back down, internalize her frustration, and accept the power imbalance.
He doesn't even have to push the button. Just knowing it's sitting there on his desk is enough to keep her quiet.
Precisely.
And the final function.
Permanent positioning. The text argues that through the hoarding of this material, she is transformed from a free, autonomous individual into a permanently accessible, threatened node within his network.
A threatened node.
Yes. She is fixed in place, completely subordinate to his control, entirely stripped of her agency.
Let me process this, because when you break it down into preventing exit, suppressing demands, and permanent positioning, this isn't a relationship anymore.
No, it's not.
The author is describing human ransomware. He's basically installed malware on her life. He encrypted her freedom, and the ransom she has to pay every single day is her perpetual submission.
That is a devastatingly accurate way to frame it. It's an effective use of digital vulnerability to enforce the patriarchal power dynamic the essay critiques. According to the text, he has successfully closed the loop of physical, psychological, and social control.
It is just so bleak to look at 045's situation. She entered this dynamic just looking for basic human value and ended up a hostage to it. But I want to pivot here, because the text doesn't just leave us in the dark. It offers a counter-narrative, right? If EARS-45 represents a compromised system, a total breach of security, how did the observer, the author of the text, manage to repel the exact same hacker?
This is where the essay shifts from an autopsy of control to a blueprint for resistance.
Okay, good. We need some resistance.
The observer, referred to as I, represents the antithesis of 045's vulnerability. The observer's strategy, as detailed in the text, was not simply to reject Zhang San as an individual bad actor. The strategy was to reject the entire default script that empowered him in the first place.
That is a massive distinction. It wasn't about saying Zhang San is a bad guy, I just need to find a good guy who plays the game better. It was recognizing that the game itself is rigged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The observer rejected the fundamental premise that a woman's value is predicated on being chosen by a man. Because the observer generated their own internal value, independently of male validation, they did not need Zhang San's desire to justify their existence. His primary currency was worthless to them.
If we stick with the tech analogy we've been building, the observer didn't just try to install better antivirus software to fight him off. They took their computer completely off his network.
The essay actually uses a brilliant technological metaphor to describe this. It refers to the observer as an unlocatable node.
An unlocatable node.
Yes. Because the observer did not seek validation through the romantic script, they provided zero data interfaces for Zhang San to latch onto.
What does that mean practically, though? Like, how do you become an unlocatable node in everyday life?
According to the text, it meant there was no emotional desperation for him to exploit.
Okay.
There were no intimate photos exchanged, no compromising videos recorded, not even a fully vulnerable, authentic identity offered up for his consumption. He was trying to plug into ports that the observer had simply closed off.
She gave him nothing to grip, no leverage whatsoever.
None. To Zhang San's manipulations, his attempts to train her or extract submission, the text states the observer simply returned a null value.
A null value. I love that.
Think about a computer program querying a database. If the database returns a null value, absolutely nothing. The program has nothing to process. It crashes the operation.
Right.
The essay argues that Zhang San could only exert control over those who actively agreed to walk onto the stage and play the passive role dictated by the romantic script.
So by refusing to even enter the theater, by not caring if she got the part, the observer was completely immune to the performance.
Exactly. The core argument here is that the power Zhang San wields is not inherent to him as an individual.
It's not magic.
No, it is power granted to him by the systemic script, but it is activated by the other person's willingness to value themselves according to that same script.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The essay is laying out a pretty profound concept.
It really is.
It means true resistance, whether you agree with the full political scope of the author's theory or not, isn't about fighting the hacker hand to hand. It's about closing the ports. If you do not put your self-worth on the scale of being chosen by someone else, there's quite literally nothing for anyone to leverage against you. You become unhackable.
Synthesizing the core message of this deep dive, we see two divergent paths within the author's cultural framework.
Yeah.
The tragedy of 045 is that she was driven by her own deep vulnerabilities to seek value within a broken script. And because she played by those rules, it resulted in a closed loop of control, culminating in the terror of that digital nuclear button.
She sought love and ended up in a cage.
But the triumph of the observer is the realization of true subjectivity. By stepping entirely outside the script, by refusing to let external desire dictate internal worth, the observer achieved real freedom.
Wow.
It's a powerful argument that personal agency requires recognizing the invisible systems that attempt to define our behavior.
It really is. It forces you to look at the invisible scaffolding behind everyday interactions. We've talked a lot about the romantic script and the extreme lengths of control in this specific case study today.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
But I want to leave you with a lingering thought that goes beyond just romance. Think about the rest of your life. In your career, your friendships, your family dynamics, what other scripts are you running on autopilot? Where are you unknowingly handing someone else the remote control to your self-worth? And what would happen tomorrow if, instead of playing along with their operating system, you simply returned a null value?